Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's... Oh, I just lost my screen. How did I lose my screen? Okay, we'll get this. We'll figure this out. There we are. Here we are. Okay, welcome, everybody, to this week's follow-up to a little experimental project I did 2 or maybe it's 3 weeks ago now that some of you watching live here were probably a part of, which was a screening, a movie night on a Monday night of a documentary, which was part of my production studio that my wife and I launched about 3 years ago. And that film went over very well. We got some great feedback. It was called The Arctic Theater for War or International Cooperation, about a 36-minute film. Just had it screened actually in Russia at a film festival in Sochi, Russia. Just came back a few days ago. Still struggling from a little bit of jet lag, but this idea, this long-awaited idea of breaking free of empire and launching the world into the 21st century based upon the reassertion of sovereign nation states cooperating around an idea of win-win cooperation that breaks out of this game theory model. That whole story was told in the course of this documentary, which went through the origins, the dark origins of Canada. What was the fight around the Civil War really all about as far as a global chemistry of what the world was going to be? Why did Russia save the United States? Why did Russia sell Alaska originally to the United States in the wake of the Civil War? All of these questions and how the Bering Strait idea of developing rail across the Bering Strait evolved and was sabotaged and was behind many of the major events that we've not been properly informed about over the next 160 years. So it was a fun documentary. Like I said, we got a great bit of feedback. And I decided, hey, we've made a lot of documentaries. I pitched it to John. He liked the idea. And so we're going to do this now for at least a couple of months. Every Monday night, we'll watch one of the films from my studio, from our production house, either at the Canadian Patriot Production Videos or the Rising Tide Foundation. We have a few friends also who have begun making films, working with us, that I might invite on as also guests, so that after we watch one of these films, or today we will have a small 10-minute film and then a larger 22-minute film that work kind of together, dealing with something I think everybody here watching is probably familiar with. If you're not, you got to get on the ball. Operation Gladio, the NATO secret armies. So that story is going to be told in 2 different ways. And I'm hoping, like the first showing that we did with the Alaska video, we had a really nice interactivity with the audience. So I'm hoping that people, and I'm going to do my best. I'm not always good at this, especially when I don't have a co-host, but I'm going to do my best to keep an eyeball on the chats. I will try, but I don't guarantee that I will catch everything. If you find yourself writing something super potent and great that you think is useful and you're wondering, why am I not addressing the thing that you wrote? Assume that I didn't see it and maybe write it again. And if I still don't see it, forgive me. But I'll try my best. Yeah, I've got a lot of love already going on here. A lot of people like documentaries, of course. So what we'll do before I do anything else, we're going to listen to a word from one of today's sponsors, which is, let me see here, it's River BTC. So let me just launch into an ad. Let's do that. So we got to go to the media assets, and then River BTC is right here. There we are. Okay, here we go. Stacks Sats with River, the Bitcoin only platform built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Why River? 0 free recurring buys. Stack Bitcoin effortlessly, hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. 3.8% Bitcoin interest on cash. FDIC insured, no minimums. Withdraw anytime. Expert US-based support, human help, plus private client services for big buys of $100,000 or more. Business accounts, boost your balance sheet with Bitcoin and earn 3.8% paid in Bitcoin. Top tier wallet. Send, receive, and manage Bitcoin securely. Unmatched security, full reserve custody, multi-sig cold storage, and proof of reserves. Join the Bitcoin revolution at badlandsmedia.tv/river and earn real returns. That's badlandsmedia.tv/river. All right. There we are. And now, actually, let's just do the second ad too, because these are pretty short. And we all like Trezor. So here it is, Trezor. Trezor. Your crypto deserves the ultimate protection, and Trezor delivers just that. Trezor offers a secure, user-friendly solution for managing your digital assets. It delivers on its promise of robust security, providing a crucial layer of protection against online threats and unauthorized access. Since 2014, over 2 million users have trusted Trezor, the world's first hardware wallet, to secure their Bitcoin, Ethereum, and over 9,000 other coins and tokens. With state-of-the-art encryption and offline storage, Trezor keeps your assets safe from hackers, malware, and exchange breaches. It is open source designed. Its open source design ensures transparency, while the Trezor Suite app makes managing your portfolio a breeze. Buy, sell, swap, and track with ease. Designed with simplicity in mind, Trezor ensures that even those new to cryptocurrency can navigate its features with ease. With Trezor, you can confidently manage your cryptocurrencies, knowing that your digital wealth is protected by industry-level security protocols. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/Trezor to get your Trezor and safeguard your crypto with confidence. That's badlandsmedia.tv/Trezor. Okay, it went too fast for me. I've got to learn how to read even faster, I guess. That's all right. New thing for the New Year pledges. Learn how to read faster. All right. So without further ado, so here actually a couple of additional words for context. Some people might have noticed some uncomfortable anomalies. One of those anomalies is in the form of, let me just upload this little video, or not this video, this image here, in the form of technocratic, high-level players who have been positioned into situations of high authority in the current transatlantic rules-based international basket case order, who seem to have strange features when looking at their family trees. And by that, I'm, of course, referring here to the example of Chrystia Freeland and the gentleman on the right circled, whose name was Mikhail Chomiak. Mikhail Chomiak was one of the highest-ranking Nazi officials in Ukraine, and who ran pretty much the entire Goebbels apparatus, the propaganda outlets, the major Nazi media in Ukraine during World War II, fueling propaganda that was helping to purge the land of any of the Untermenschen, who is the undesirable humans. That printing press was acquired by a former Jewish printer whose assets were confiscated and basically given by the Nazis to this guy who pledged his loyalty. Chomiak, of course, after World War II was done, this guy was a big promoter of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. After the war, he didn't get punished. He was given basically a lot of protection, and he was flown over to Canada, where he became the father of he basically set up a new family in the west coast of Canada, and his granddaughter is Chrystia Freeland. His daughter was, I'm forgetting her name, but she became a key figure around George Soros, very close to George Soros, and she actually worked to help overthrow the first government of Ukraine in 2004 in Color Revolution 1.0, Orange Revolution. That she was a co-author of the first Ukrainian constitution, and her daughter, Chrystia, who's the granddaughter of Mikhail Chomiak, became the finance minister of Canada, the deputy minister of Canada, and currently the special envoy to Ukraine for Canada. She's also been nominated or been appointed to become the head of the Rhodes Trust, one of the most powerful institutions organizing international Rhodes scholars and adjacent think tanks that coordinate globalist endeavors. So that's her new gig. This is her not that long ago holding up a sign saying basically Slava Ukraina, and featuring the red and black flag, the symbols of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. That was the Nazi brand in Ukraine during World War II. Another figure that people might have noticed, everyone knows that a big contract has taken place between the USA and England in the last few months major $700 billion deal. Palantir over AI surveillance, other things. Palantir is going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this deal that will help sort of spread a sort of digital panopticon. And who's the head of Palantir UK? Well, this guy here, and his name is Louis Mosley. Louis Mosley has an interesting last name, and when I caught my eye, I was like, well, is there any relation to, because the only other Mosley that I knew who was a major player inside of England's history was that guy. So for those who don't know, that's Sir Oswald Mosley, the head of the British Union of Fascists in 1930s and 40s. One of the key architects of what became the European Union, actually. That's an embarrassing point for those inspired and patriotic about the European idea and the European Union. He was actually one of the loudest promoters after World War II. And that's Oswald Mosley with receiving his little Hitler salute from his minions. And he was the guy who was going to likely be the prime minister, the Nazi prime minister of England, had Hitler been successful in getting England to go back to their promise to ally with Hitler. And since we're talking about the UK right now, let's go for another figure who was recently appointed as the head of MI6. And that lady over there, who is the new head of MI6 as of, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, it was revealed that her grandfather also is that guy on the right, who was a former high-level Nazi spy chief who was actually born Russian and then defected to become a Waffen-SS operative in Ukraine during World War II, and went on to lead a successful career after World War II, working within a certain thing called Operation Gladio. So I'm just scratching the surface. I could have said some stuff about Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, that would have blown your minds, and her father's role in installing unreconstructed Nazis into positions of influence in Germany under Reinhard Gehlen, who's going to come up in our documentary today. I could have said something about her grandfather and his Nazi proclivities too, as a very high-level Nazi. I could have talked about the head of the Bilderberger Group, which he's going to come up, actually, a very close friend of Prince Philip Mountbatten, who died in 2004, but from the House of Orange, and that's that Prince Bernhard that I'm talking about, who also created and was a forefather of most of the environmental organizations that we have today that spread around the world. So it's not just Palantir right-wing fascists on the one hand pushing some form of Nazi panopticon today, who are the heirs, literal heirs, not just spiritual, psychological, or ideological, but also genetic heirs, keeping it in the family of those assets who are used to get a new world order back over 80 years ago. But then also you have on the left, right? So both sides, you get a convergence when you go to extremes. That's the rule. The rule of being human, the rule of the human system and managing human systems is if you push people to either extreme, you will get convergence. So we can talk more about that. So what I'm going to do, we've got 2 videos lined up, as I mentioned. The main feature is called, as was announced, Election Interference, NATO, the Five Eyes, and the Ugly Truth of CSIS. CSIS, for those who don't know, is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. That's the Canadian CIA, for lack of the better word. And I decided before that, to play a shorter video that I made with my good friend and filmmaking ally, Jason Dahl. I should actually get him on for one of our little Monday broadcasts to just be introduced and to chat with the audience a little bit, because this guy's a bit of a filmmaking genius, and he made a sort of a preamble with a bit more of a U.S. focus regarding specifically the question of what causes Western-based terrorist movements, or terrorist movements more generally. Are they sociologically emerging phenomenon, or are there high-level intelligence apparatuses behind their growth and cultivation and deployment, as we've seen in the case of Syria and beyond in recent years? And sure enough, you'll get the answer. So we're going to do that 10-minute one first. Jason Dahl is the narrator. I wrote the script. He also not only narrated, but he also did the actual hard work of making it into a film. And then we'll shift gears and listen to the 20-minute video together. Now, last thing, there might be some choppiness. I don't know. Last time it went pretty well, but I got a few complaints that at different moments, because the StreamYard intermediary that the streaming of longer videos is not always super smooth. And if that happens, I'm really sorry, but I'm sure the video will still play. And then we can have a little quick back and forth, and then watch the big one. So without further ado, here is who's your real enemy, Russia, China, or something else? Hope everyone can hear this. We're going to jack up the volume and hit play.
We are being told daily that China is interfering in our country's democracies. From secret police stations, military balloon attacks, honeypots, biowarfare, economic manipulation, and election interference, the media, intelligence agencies, and political class have all come to agree that there isn't a single part of our lives that isn't threatened by the evil agenda of the Chinese. Obviously, these allegations insinuate operations well above and beyond the normal levels of statecraft and diplomacy expected of internationally engaged nations. Such bold claims must be backed up by solid evidence, right? It's not like our media and governments would lie to us, would they?
I think we will find weapons of mass destruction. I think it's important that we do. He's lying to him when he says he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction.
It's high time we enumerate these many allegations and check the available facts, lest we rush into judgments that, as a nation, could derail us from the track to world peace. As the world is slowly learning from the debacle in Ukraine, nations acting under false pretenses bear heavy costs. On November 2016, everyone knew that Russia had taken control of the USA. Great patriots like former FBI Director Robert Mueller and the mainstream media worked closely to ensure that Americans understood that Donald Trump's victory against Hillary Clinton was made possible by Russian WikiLeaks and Russian financing directly from the Kremlin.
The Russian government, they have hacked American websites, American accounts of private people, of institutions. Then they have given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet, clearly from Putin himself.
All educated citizens were taught to have these correct opinions, and they were also taught to believe that Russia selected Donald Trump in order to revive right-wing racist extremism in order to destroy American democracy from within. The FBI taught educated Americans that uneducated Trump-supporting domestic terrorists tried to kidnap Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2020, which was thankfully thwarted by the astute, patriotic FBI. These well-educated Americans also learned that those same white supremacist extremists tried to take control of the USA in the worst insurgency on American soil since the Civil War on January 6, 2021. And then...
No, and then!
Something happened.
It might not have produced everything of what some Republicans hope for. It is, regardless, devastating to the FBI, and to a degree, it does exonerate Donald Trump.
So he said it exonerated Donald Trump to a degree, but in the past, the media has vouched for the debunked Steele dossier.
Based on our own reporting and word from numerous official sources, the dossier, in fact, is far from bogus.
No major thing from the dossier has been conclusively disproven.
We already know that the part about the coverage that they have on him with sex actions is supposed to be true.
The intelligence community has corroborated, whoever paid for it, has corroborated a lot of the information that was in there to begin with.
The Durham report was published demonstrating that Russiagate was a lie. Neither the FBI nor CIA had a shred of evidence that the Russian government had any influence over President Trump. And without issuing an overt apology, even CIA mouthpieces like CNN had to admit it was all a fraud. The reality was that the Christopher Steele dirty dossier was created out of thin air by MI6 operatives, including Sir Richard Dearlove, the former head of MI6, who had earlier overseen the creation of another sexed-up dossier that proved Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, leading to the murder of millions, the overthrow of Iraq, and a surveillance state dragnet under the Five Eyes. When evidence emerged that the Whitmer kidnapping plot of 2018 was entirely staged and carried out by FBI informants who made up 12 of the 16 members of the domestic terror cell, the issue moved from extremism to FBI entrapment. And what about January 6th? According to FBI whistleblower testimony and video evidence which has been made public, it appears that the same FBI operation which staged the Michigan kidnapping operation was done again on a national scale, with FBI informants and agents instigating violence the entire time.
And refused to condemn white supremacists and hate groups.
It wouldn't be surprising, since Steve D'Antuono, the FBI's Michigan bureau chief during the Whitmer fiasco, was immediately promoted to manage the Washington, D.C. bureau, where he oversaw the January 6th insurgency. During the same time period, it was revealed by leaked FBI documents that Joshua Caleb Sutter, controller of the white supremacist group Atomwaffen, and also the Satanic Temple of Blood cult, was paid over $180,000 by the FBI since 2003, $80,000 of which was paid out after 2018. An often forgotten Fordham University study from 2013 featuring analysis of over 138 cases of terrorism stopped by the valiant FBI since 9/11 demonstrated the embarrassing fact that almost no instances existed of domestic terrorism arising without the direction of the FBI itself. Reporting on the Fordham study, The Nation magazine stated,
"Nearly every major post-9/11 terrorism-related prosecution has involved a sting operation, at the center of which is a government informant. In these cases, the informants, who work for money or are seeking leniency on criminal charges of their own, have crossed the line from merely observing potential criminal behavior to encouraging and assisting people to participate in plots that are largely scripted by the FBI itself. Under the FBI's guiding hand, the informants provide the weapons, suggest the targets, and even initiate the inflammatory political rhetoric that later elevates the charges to the level of terrorism."
What about 9/11 itself, you ask? Well, let's just say 2 planes can't cause 3 buildings to collapse without more than a little help. Perhaps whoever was in charge of the FBI when 9/11 happened might know something about that paradox. Despite all of the lies which have come to the surface in recent years, it is no small irony that the same script is currently being pulled out of the dumpster, dusted off, and attempted once more as the Washington Post proclaims that Russia is out to do it again. What the Durham report proves they never did in the first place. One could even say they're determined to strike. When faced with this disturbing array of evidence, a conspiracy theorist, or realist as they are now known, might be forgiven for concluding that the USA's FBI, CIA, and Britain's MI6 appear to be colluding together to coerce Americans to live in fear of foreign governments in Eurasia, out to destroy our freedoms, while ignoring the fact that the actual foreign interference into our democratic institutions appears to be coming from those same agencies which have been financing terrorism, controlling media, and managing puppet politicians for decades. But, as the great washed and educated conspiracy theorists of Russiagate will tell us, the news media never lies, unless it's Fox News. And the intelligence community has cleaned up its act ever since the Church Committee brought the corruption of the CIA into the light over 40 years ago. Anything else is just misinformation.
But the destruction of the rule of law is a tremendous threat to Western civilization. And I was asked the other day, and I took a little heat for it. They said, "Who's our biggest threat? Is it China, sir? Is it Russia?" I said, "No, our biggest threat are high-level politicians that work in the United States government."
Okay, all right. So that was the first little preamble of today's performance. And for some reason, I'm really not good at this whole getting on the stage and off the stage thing. I don't know why I've lost that skill, but anyway, I'll figure this out, guys. I really will. So yeah, as I was saying, that was the first preamble performance that sets the stage for the ultimate main course. I hope you folks enjoyed that. The idea, of course, is to get across that terrorism is a giant goose egg. It's a scarecrow. It's not a thing. It wouldn't be a thing were it not for the artificial social engineers from the top who are also trying to act like our saviors and protectors, promoting a massive surveillance state dragnet to protect the Western free world from terrorism, but it's the very terrorists that they themselves have created. So you see how the game is played, right? It's kind of like where you can encounter a lot of people who are being manipulated into thinking that they have to give their hate over to immigrants, right? There's definitely an immigrant problem all over the place. Some of the immigrants coming in from countries in the Middle East and from Africa are violent, from Venezuela, from other countries of Latin America. Some of them are violent people. Not all of them. Some of them are very good people who have just been through a terrible experience. They have no economy. They have no jobs. They have no life back home. They want something better. That's I would say the majority, but you can't deny that there are definitely bad apples, bad gangs that are inclined to a lot of violence that have been brought in. But the thing is, again, just to see how the trap is set, those same agencies, intelligence, military agencies that over decades destroyed their countries, destroyed their nations, promoted the radicalization of young, uneducated, useful, disposable idiots, on the one hand, after destroying their lives, watching people that they know and love getting blown up in front of their face, that screws up people's brains heavily. And then on top of that, you have indoctrinating madrasas, Wahhabite conditioning on top of that in many cases. Child soldiers who never should have been child soldiers. They should have been kids in school with a job to look out for. They had to kill other human beings by the age of 8. That does things to the mind. And now all of a sudden, an opportunity to get out of Africa or out of the Middle East is provided, and all of a sudden you find yourself in Germany, in Philadelphia, in Toronto, or wherever, Sweden, and you're still getting support. Those same agencies that were giving you the radicalization, the money, the funding, the arms, the directives to go and overthrow governments that were unacceptable by that very same CIA, MI6 apparatus that doesn't like nationalistic governments, that wants to use proxies like Boko Haram, like Al-Qaeda to overthrow them, like we saw with Bashar al-Assad, or like we've seen with so many nationalist African leaders who deal with insurgents like this, or just outright get assassinated. Now all of a sudden they're still getting their support, though they may not even realize it now that they're here in the West. So then soft-minded Westerners see the problem of immigrant gangs and other things. They're losing their jobs. Our economy's crap, and we give our hate over to those things. And you see how the game is played, right? It's always the same formula, and we have to be really strong-minded to not play the game, because if you play by the rules of the game, it's like going into the casino. You cannot win. The house will always ultimately win. You can't play by the rules of a rigged game. You have to break those artificial rules. That's why game theory is not actually a useful way to live. If you play by the rules of game theory and you accept its assumptions, you lose your creative powers. And we could talk about that. So now, with that rant having been done, I'm going to quickly just scan through some of the comments that I might have missed. Somebody says, Matt, you need a chat secretary to watch for interesting cues and input from the people. Concurred. That's a great idea. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to think about how to make that happen. Rising Tide Foundation. Okay, somebody just approves of our Rising Tide Foundation. Yes, thank you very much. I'm just scrolling right now. Okay. I obviously don't have the capacity to do what I thought I could do. So I'm going to try to get better at this. Until they never said, somebody has a quote from Feynman, Richard P. Feynman, the physicist, saying, never confuse education with intelligence. You can have a PhD and still be an idiot. Wise words from Feynman. Flying Axeblade says, I also believe since there are so many proper names for a variety of devils instead of satanic, I've begun using sadistic. Take back the archaic language prompts. Okay. The number 8 is launched there too. I don't know what that means. Somebody else wrote, Flying Axeblade said again, part of the counter narrative that I missed was when I was equating the New World Order with the reset. I now believe these are cohabitating threads, but not two heads of the same beast, different animals. Well, yeah, I guess there's nuance. Is that what you're? I concur. A lot of people hear the word New World Order, the words New World Order, and they think immediately that means evil, or they hear the word reset and they think that has the same meaning for all people, and it doesn't. The fact is, we will be getting a new system. The current system is designed to fail. It's based upon unworkable principles of worshiping money, thinking short term. So a system bounded by that must collapse. The question is, when the collapse does happen, do we have a moral and intelligent enough of a people that are able to wield the tools of political power, especially through the sovereign nation state, to ensure that the blast front hits and does the damage on those purveyors, the arsonists who carried out the fires that burnt our society down in the first place? Or are we going to allow the general mass population to take the hit? And that's the big fight as far as I could see it. But that's another conversation right there. Okay, so let me just jump right into the next film, the main film, which means I have to get rid of the current one. Stop screen. Let me do another share screen. And this one will now be The Five Eyes, NATO, and the Ugly Truth of CSIS. 20 minutes long. I hope you all enjoy. I just realized it's not actually playing. So let me try that one more time. One more time, and we'll get it right this time. All right. There we go.
Beijing's assistance to the Liberal Party. China's interference in Canadian elections.
In recent years, Canadians have been hit with a deafening barrage of stories, repeated daily across mainstream and alternative media outlets, professing to explain to citizens who our national enemies are and who we should fear and hate. Whether our fears should be given to evil Russians out to thwart our democratic order, as has been repeated by Democrats and liberals since the emergence of Donald Trump into the White House in 2016, or whether our fears should be given to the vicious Chinese, whom we are told placed puppets such as Joe Biden or Justin Trudeau into power. The stories of foreign dangers to Canada's freedoms are continuous. More recently, diplomatic ties with India have been nearly destroyed by claims that India's government has carried out assassinations of enemies of Modi on Canadian soil. But across all of the claims of Indian, Russian, and Chinese villainous activity, two facts are impossible to ignore. Number one, in no cases do we find any actual evidence presented to the public, and instead we hear only tales of anecdotes, anonymous sources, and secret evidence which we are told must certainly exist. Number two, in all of those cases, the Paul Reveres ringing the alarms into a sleeping population are directly affiliated with Canada's intelligence agencies, with special emphasis on Canada's Security Intelligence Service, otherwise known as CSIS. Since these claims of foreign interference are coming from Canada's intelligence agencies, and since these agencies have been enmeshed with imperial intrigue, coups, wars, and assassinations for generations. And since today's world is spiraling quickly into a potential thermonuclear war, with military encirclements of Russia, China, and India now underway, perhaps it would be helpful to take a deep breath, step back from the drama, and ask, what exactly is CSIS or the RCMP? And are they the patriotic, freedom-loving institutions which we have been told? Or is there a darker picture of another foreign power found to be steering our governments and undermining our democracies, which may not have either Russian, Indian, or Chinese characteristics? Formed on March 6, 1946, the UK-USA Signals Agreement established what became known as the Five Eyes, that soon involved the global dragnet of intelligence agencies led by Britain's GCHQ and MI6. Soon, other Anglo-Saxon spy agencies such as Canada's Communications Security Establishment and RCMP joined into the alliance, along with partner agencies in Australia and New Zealand. It is no coincidence that March 6, 1946 was also the same day that Winston Churchill delivered his infamous Iron Curtain speech in Fulton, Missouri, setting into motion the framework of the Cold War.
In the Baltic, to Trieste in the Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe.
Under this new order, ushered in by President Truman and Churchill, America's OSS was disbanded, and President Franklin Roosevelt's dream of a US-Russia-China alliance to shape the post-war world was destroyed. In this new scheme for a new world order, America's closest allies that fought by her side to prevent the success of the Nazi war machine were now rebranded as America's enemies, while America's enemies became her closest allies. An Anglo-American special relationship was launched by Truman, and on September 8, 1947, a new intelligence service was created modeled on Britain's MI6 called the Central Intelligence Agency. During the Cold War, Anglo-Saxon governments worked together both to conduct asymmetric warfare and espionage against Russia and China abroad, while also spying on citizens within the nations of the Five Eyes directly. Since it is illegal for national governments of the Five Eyes to infringe upon the civil liberties of their own citizens through mass surveillance, it was deemed expedient for the Five Eyes to create a project dubbed Echelon, in order to coordinate spying on citizens globally within and outside of the alliance itself. The Five Eyes agencies were so secretive that even elected government officials did not know of its existence until the 1970s. Take the case of Australia's Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam. As soon as Whitlam discovered the existence of this agency's tentacles within his own nation, he demanded that it be shut down. But a day before he was to announce his plan to the Australian Parliament, he was called into the Governor-General's office and was promptly fired. That's right. For Commonwealth members of the Five Eyes, the actual head of state is the monarchy's unelected Governor-General and not the Prime Minister. As such, Prime Ministers can, and in the case of Australia, have been fired for disrupting imperial plans. It is well known that the Five Eyes interfaces closely with another organization called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or simply NATO. NATO was created in 1949 to bypass the influence which Russia and China held within the United Nations Security Council. And this organization wasted no time to incorporate leading Nazis into its governing structure. Between 1950 until the 1980s, NATO had multiple unreconstructed Nazis in control of multiple departments, including several consecutive commanders of Central Europe. If you find this hard to believe, let's have a look at a few of them. Adolf Heusinger, Chief of Staff of the General Nazis during World War II. In the post-war age, he he found new employment as chief of the West German Army and general of the Bundeswehr from 1957 to 1961. From 1961 to 1964, Huizinga became chairman of the NATO Military Committee, but he wasn't alone. In fact, the position of NATO Commander-in-Chief of Allied Forces Central Europe was a position that was filled solely by former Nazis for 16 years straight, between 1967 and 1983. Even Hitler's intelligence chief, Reinhard Gehlen, found new employment under the CIA's Allen Dulles as the head of West German intelligence from 1956 until 1968. Among those World War II killers who worked with Gehlen in Europe was Stefan Bandera, the vicious Ukrainian fascist, and thousands of members of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists whose skills were put to work carrying out asymmetric warfare against socialist-leaning leaders of Europe and also the population more broadly. In The Empire on Which the Black Sun Never Set, historian Cynthia Chung noted that a vast secret fascist army of Nazis and Italian fascist stay-behinds was organized under NATO.
These stay-behinds were used to carry out assassinations of anti-imperial leaders like Italy's former Prime Minister Aldo Moro in 1978, Sweden's Prime Minister Olof Palme in 1986, known as Sweden's JFK, Italian industrialist Enrico Mattei in 1960, Turkey's Prime Minister Adnan Menderes in 1961, along with two cabinet colleagues, and U.S. President Kennedy in 1963, and multiple attempts against French President Charles de Gaulle.
Chung writes that on top of targeted assassinations, NATO's secret armies
were to be used against the people. The desire was that by staging false flag operations that were blamed on communists, panic and revulsion would be invoked, sending voters flocking to the welcoming arms to so-called secure right-wing governments.
In 1959, an internal NATO briefing minute dated June 1st of that year slipped into the hands of a British newspaper, which revealed that the task of the stay-behind units had been switched from confronting a Soviet invasion to confronting an internal subversion. The secret armies were henceforth to play a determining role, not only in the general policy level of domestic warfare, but also in the politics of domestic emergency. What this meant was that a secret army of stay-behind units under the direction of NATO, in absence of a Soviet threat, were to direct their actions to the internal matters which would include espionage and acts of terrorism on the citizens of Europe, with the support and cover of those nations' police units. This would be used to further centralize control within right-wing governments who supported the NATO apparatus. Of the dozens of cases of domestic terror unleashed by this operation across Europe, the most well-documented is the Years of Lead, launched in Italy in 1969, which saw hundreds of bombs detonated by supposedly communist terrorist cells in shopping malls, trains, and other public venues, killing hundreds. As was revealed in declassified reports, these terror cells did not receive their funding, support, and directives from either the Kremlin or Beijing, as duped citizens were led to believe, but rather by NATO and the Five Eyes. NATO's strategy of tension finally became public knowledge, dubbed Operation Gladio, when Italian Prime Minister Andreotti revealed it to the world in a public speech in 1992. The significance for Canada will be known shortly. The growth of the surveillance state across the Five Eyes nations has been made possible by the belief that terrorism, both foreign and domestic, is such a threat that resisting it requires the abandonment of civil liberties in order to protect the greater good. But is this popular belief true? In 2016, a Canadian appeals court overruled guilty sentences handed down to a Canadian couple who were caught by the RCMP before their 2016 jihadi plot to bomb a public venue on Canada Day could occur. Why did the appeals judge overrule their sentence? Because on closer examination, it was discovered that every single member of the operation which radicalized the young people, trained them to make bombs, and even scripted their attack were RCMP informants. Earlier cases of controlled domestic terrorist movements in Canada saw CSIS, that is Canada's Security and Intelligence Service, erase thousands of hours of wiretaps of Sikh terrorists that detonated bombs in 1984, which led to 329 dead in the worst act of aviation terrorism until 9/11. What was on those wiretaps that CSIS was so afraid the public would see? Is it possible that those Sikh terrorists were also groomed by Canadian intelligence agencies, just as the more recent jihadi terror cell had been groomed in 2016? Or is it more similar to the case of the FBI handlers of Egyptian informant Ahmad Salem, who ignored the dozens of warnings of their informant and let the 1993 World Trade Center bombing take place, even though it could have easily been prevented? In that case, Salem had the wits to secretly record hundreds of hours of conversation with his FBI handlers, which were then made public by the New York Times on October 28, 1993. By destroying their wiretaps, CSIS ensured that these questions will never be answered. And while Canadians were told that only racists and white supremacists resist government lockdowns or promote trucker protests, it is too often forgotten that Canada's largest white supremacist group, known as the Heritage Front, was revealed to have been founded by a CSIS agent named Grant Bristol, who ran the organization between 1988 and 1994. Anglo-Canadian intelligence controls of domestic terrorism, which reek of Operation Gladio tactics, can even be traced as far back as the nominally Maoist terrorist organization Le Front de Libération de Québec of the 1960s that set dozens of mailbox bombs off across the province. Not only did the RCMP security services get caught red-handed managing FLQ cells, spreading FLQ graffiti on buildings, and even supplying explosives to the group itself, but the FLQ's intellectual leader, Pierre Valliere, was also the editor-in-chief of the very same magazine, Cité Libre, which was run for a decade by none other than Canada's Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. As Pierre Valliere himself later wrote in his Execution of Pierre Laporte, it was a special operation division of the RCMP that oversaw the murder of the kidnapped Deputy Premier of Quebec in 1970, and the illegal arrest of over 400 Quebec citizens under the fog of domestic terrorism, itself a construct of the same department of the RCMP and the Strategic Operations Center, which interfaced between Pierre Elliott Trudeau directly and the military during the crisis. Due to the crisis caused by this terrorist cell, martial law was imposed onto Quebec for the month of October in 1970, as the FLQ terrorists who kidnapped Deputy Premier Pierre Laporte refused to negotiate with authorities. In 1977, the Quebec government launched the Keeble Commission to investigate the evidence of the RCMP's role in controlling FLQ terror cells. This was followed by the federal MacDonald Commission, which unveiled more abuses by the Canadian intelligence community during its 4-year inquiry of 1977 until 1981. In its final report published in 1981, the MacDonald Commission recommended removing national security matters from the RCMP's jurisdiction by creating a new, partially civilian spy agency. Trudeau's right-hand man and fellow Cité Libre writer Michael Pitfield oversaw the creation of this new agency dubbed the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, in 1983 as a branch of the Privy Council Office in order to continue psychological operations, but now under a new name. The origin of CSIS and parallels to the operation of NATO's secret armies, which carried out the murder of Prime Minister Aldo Moro in 1977, following the identical pattern as seen in the case of Quebec's Pierre Laporte, is jarring to say the least. The next time the Emergency Measures Act would be used in Canada was by another Trudeau Prime Minister on behalf of the Five Eyes over 50 years later. If anyone wishes to look through the voluminous RCMP CSIS files accumulated on Pierre Trudeau's strange connections with the FLQ, they would be out of luck, as historians were informed in 2019 that the entire Trudeau record archive was secretly destroyed by CSIS in 1989, simply because someone deemed they weren't interesting. Canadians and Americans have forgotten that the abuses of these Five Eyes intelligence agencies was already exposed over 45 years ago during the 1975 Church Committee hearings and 1976 House Select Committee on Assassinations. These hearings unveiled such secret CIA projects as MKUltra, Project Mockingbird, and COINTELPRO, the latter which was directly implicated in terrorizing anti-imperial movements such as those led by Martin Luther King Jr., Fred Hampton, and Malcolm X, under the pretext that these organizations were communist fronts. The reason why Canadians even have an organization called CSIS in the first place is because the terrorist-deploying branch of the RCMP Special Operations Units were exposed over 40 years ago. But the idea that they are now clean, patriotic agencies is a myth. These agencies were created and operated by fascists throughout the Cold War and carried out atrocities, terrorism, and assassinations under the name of fighting communism in order to convince Western citizens that we had to give up our liberties to save our freedoms. It is clear that the threat of communism was used to silence those who were actual patriots of their countries and were leaders of democratic movements who were called communists, and this absurdly continues to this day, and we continue to buy into it. This is well documented and is a truth we need to acknowledge when looking into what these Five Eyes and NATO intelligence agencies have been consistently working towards for over 78 years. Although the Cold War is said to have ended in 1991, the techniques used by Operation Gladio to maintain constant terror in the population has continued with the war on Islamic terrorism. But now that Russia and China have decided to resist the unipolar agenda for global world government and depopulation, the old boogeyman of communist infiltration of our Western democracies has been unveiled once more. And almost like a magic spell, Western media consumers are falling back into their old Cold War profiles and forgetting about the real agencies that murdered the Kennedy brothers in 1963 and 1968. They are forgetting about the false flags that enmeshed us into a war in Vietnam and carried out bombings of World Trade Centers in 1993 and 2001. The question is now, if you have this knowledge, do you want to continue to drink Five Eyes Kool-Aid portraying Russia and China as your boogeymen once again? Or do you want to fight the real enemy that has infiltrated your government?
Okay, so that was a ride. I hope there were some surprises. I know it's a pretty informed audience in general, but I'm hoping that some of the elements spun in that story did still shake you up a little bit. That was the intention, and I did follow some of the remarks that were being moved through the chat room a little bit. I'll pull out a couple in a second here, but I just want to show the audience a certain thing here. I'm just opening up a window, and I'm going to show a. Oh, it's such a pain in the arse. I'm not going to do it right now. Okay, so there's a comment from Jiminy C saying you seem to be overlooking the influence of Mossad here. Is Israel not the main terrorism instigator here? There's games within games. The thing I wanted to show, and you can Google that, is the origins of Mossad and the Mossad collusion with Nazis. So in a certain article on Haaretz, which is an Israeli website, they actually cover how Mossad, which was founded in 1951, you got to keep that in mind. Like the actual, it's kind of a newbie institution, Mossad. It was modeled on the CIA, which itself was modeled on MI6. So you have a nested set of machineries, but the fact that you had leading Nazi killers who were brought in to advise and work for the Mossad and shape the Mossad also shows you that the very figures who viewed the Jewish race as an Untermenschen, underhuman subspecies, kind of like they viewed the Gypsies or the Slavs. The Jews were sort of genetically scum as well. But despite that, there was still a collusion between the higher up Nazis, Eichmann and others, who, Eichmann taught himself Hebrew in order to study Kabbalah. And for those who don't know, Kabbalah, which gets us, I think, more into the inner sanctum, actually came out of a movement of Templar Gnostic Catholic orders back in the medieval ages during the opening shots of the Crusades. So that idea of taking the oral Torah, the secret Torah, creating, new false ritualistic documents that provide code-breaking keys to interpret the secret messaging embedded within the public Torah. That was things like the Zohar, for example, that emerged in around the 12th century. These were largely done via Templar activities. The Templars, the Order of Templars being a mercenary knighthood that I think had a core Mithraic initiatory system of controls that oversaw a lot of evil, a lot of ritual mass murder, a lot of kidnapping of children, as we saw with the Children's Crusade of 1209, which was overseen by Templars that got access to something like 40,000 children through an operation to send a bunch of kids into the Middle East to take back the Holy Land. And these kids got on a bunch of Templar-managed boats and ports funded by Templar banks, which the Templars back in those days had pretty much the monopoly control of most banking, especially through their outfits in Venice. And the kids were never seen again. That was one of the biggest child abduction rackets we had ever seen in one shot. So that's the Templars for you. And there's work that's been done by a number of authors that go through a lot of this history of how the Templars used useful idiots, sociopathic Jews that they gave and granted certain dynastic privileges to and that were maintained. But this is not exactly representative of Judaism. This is a perversion within the thing that was more than happy to, in a later age, work with a bunch of Nazis. So there's games within games. So you don't want to ignore the abuses and evils and shenanigans of Mossad. However, you don't want to give it more causal impetus than it deserves, because that's what the enemy wants. The Jews, at the end of the day, always have served as a very nice, convenient enemy image to absorb the hate of victims of the oligarchy. And that's really what it is. It's a scarecrow, and at the end of the day, and there's a whole. I mean, we could talk about the nature of Sabbateanism, Frankism, as well as spin-off Gnostic cults that are identical in form to the Christian or the Islamic Gnostic sects that have infiltrated all of these major Abrahamic religions and work to steer those religions towards outcomes that are only beneficial to the feudal death cult above. So it's all interconnected in one thing. So that's my response to Jiminy C. And I'll just say this: I'm working on the final touches of a little booklet might be around 180, 200 pages. It's going to be small for the kinds of books that I tend to write. This is going to be a small one. I really want to get it done for Christmas so that people can order this for Christmas as a gift. The title of the book is going to be Why Real Patriots Don't Think Like Hitler. And the reason for that should be evident to most people listening. There is a massive coordinated top-down effort to rehabilitate the image and specter of Hitler as the good guy of World War II, and the Jews as the simplistic evil villains that Hitler was trying to defeat. And because he was unsuccessful, those same Jew bankers rewrote our history books and are solely running the world today. Super overly simplistic. People are falling for it. They're drinking up this toxic garbage, though, left and right. So I'm kind of writing my book to try to nip as many of the narrative points, the talking points that are hypnotically inductive in the bud. Well, you'll see. But I'm trying to get this done. My aim is to get this booklet done, like I said, by the 1st of December. So I'm just crashing on research to just finalize the last chapter and then just tie it all together. I think I can get it done, but I'll keep everybody posted on that progress. We have a name I can't totally pronounce. It's like a 37OZ is fun sub supporter. That's a funny name. 626. I'm not too sure what this name is, but anyway, this person writes, I was crushed when I realized everybody had been lying to me about Santa Claus. How could they all conspire in such a lie? But they had. Yeah, no, I think that Santa Claus is ultimately a pretty destructive belief. I mean, it's kind of nice and harmless, and I still feel all fuzzy inside of, going to the store and hearing the Christmas melodies and seeing the Christmas motifs. I think there is something really wholesome. We shouldn't let the bad guys win. We should not let Halloween become more dominant than Christmas, which has been an agenda for some time. That's, I think, what Tim Burton was shooting the shot heard around the world with his Nightmare Before Christmas ritual movie in the 90s. I think it was largely to get the ball rolling on amplifying Halloween, the death cult festival day, as becoming eventually more popular than Christmas. They're not there yet, thank God. But we can't let that happen. I think Christmas overall is still a good thing. The figure of Santa Claus, though, especially the one manufactured or co-opted by Coca-Cola, and all of the hypnotic and social engineering that we've had associated with that, probably has not been a good thing. And probably, I would say, in hindsight, it didn't just destroy our ability to have trust in general, because most kids will go through some trust issues when you realize all adults have been conspiring to lie to you about this figure. So that's probably a little bit damaging. But then on the other hand, you're also kind of acclimating to the idea that you're being watched at all times to be good, to be naughty or nice, and a list of your actions is being accounted for by a figure who is surveilling you at all moments and will reward you with good behavior, with gifts, or punish you with coal if you don't, if you weren't fully good. Probably not the best thing to be acclimated to at the end of the day, when you actually have Orwellian social engineers wishing to get humans to adapt to that type of actual world. So getting kids to do it at an early age was probably useful to the Palantir lovers out there in our current age in some weird way. So, which, by the way, uses, if you think about what is the imagery of a lot of the AI overseers of humanity, or the aspiring wannabe gods overseeing Olympus, or in Olympus overseeing the mortals, things like Oracle, right? This idea of the Oracle that will surveil everything you do, or the Palantir Orb, which from Lord of the Rings, I think it's the Palantir Orb, right? That's the orb that is looking with pure omniscience at all that exists at all times, and anything you want to think about as the grand sorcerer, you could just get the ball to show you what it is. So everybody's being watched at all times, everywhere. So just saying. Somebody else. Yeah, I think this is opening up a door. Harya Nanda also is sharing their trauma from the whole Santa Claus story. So Oracle of Delphi, Cassandra, the Holy Grail, and Akashic Records. Yeah, I think that personally, in my research, I think that the Akashic Records that were really spun and developed by Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophists are a crock of shit. However, the concept of it is just that very same thing, that exactly you can, if you're an adept, you can like develop clairvoyance by your powers of just pure enlightenment and then travel and read the Akashic Records where literally everything exists and you have full access to it. You're basically omniscient as a god person, if you know, and so that definitely plays into it. What the oracles, the Sibyls were doing, the oracles of Delphi and the oracles of Apollo at Delphi and more broadly, because there were many oracles, right? You had many Sibyls. I think there were 10 dominant ancient Sibyls and then sub-Sibyls within that construct of the ancient world, stretching from North Africa, Tiber, Egypt, Greece. There were several. Italy. You know, the Apennine Sibyl is the 11th symbol. A lot of this was documented by Ennius, the author of some of the Roman imperial propaganda epics. So all that to say, the Sibyls got their charm, their power by virtue of the propaganda, the belief that they could see all because they had direct unmediated intercourse with the gods. In fact, they were just having unmediated intercourse with the high priests that were raping them periodically while they were on drugs. But, you know, as far as the actual propaganda associated with them is that they had this divine revelation that if you pay the money, you can get cryptic messages, often wrapped up in a bunch of impossible to interpret ambiguous allegories, so they could never be held accountable for lying. And ultimately, they had a huge sway over superstitious kings and generals and princes and just everybody who would pay them a ton of cash. So this actually became, it seems, the foundation for imperial capitalism, imperial usurious finance, because everybody paying the money created a massive amount of wealth for the Sibyls, the oracles of the ancient world, that could then both get intelligence because everybody was telling them what they wanted to do, but they were also in shaping that very game board that they were operating on by telling people what the gods wanted them to do as far as going to war, creating a peace treaty or whatever, allowing a different cult in or banning another cult or killing Jesus, you know, whatever the Sibyl says you must do. So it was big, and they started, because they're interconnected, lending, you know, with sort of primitive bills of exchange. Later on, the Templars advanced this through their operations within the Middle East, Africa, all over Europe, and they were able to also innovate and advance upon this thing that the Sibyls had originally been doing 1,000, 2,000 years earlier. So it's kind of the same thing. It's nothing new under the sun in that sense. But I think that that's a weird way of speaking, right? When I see the choices of certain names like Oracle AI, Palantir, you know, being selected to be associated with things that are promising to give almost superhuman powers of omniscience to social engineers in my life, I shudder. I don't like that. So, all right. So let's just keep on scanning through some of these chats here. Russia won the ground war. Oh yeah, it was Lainey Lou says Russia won the ground war. We were infiltrated before World War II and funded Nazis. That is true. The Russians, people forget this, carried 95% of the fight. The Americans did a lot. You know, we did a lot, especially with Lend-Lease, helping out to keep the Russians supplied. However, the Russians were they lost 26 million of their own people. The Chinese lost over 11 million of their own people fighting the Western supported Japanese fascist regime. We only got into World War II. The Americans only got into World War II in an actual hard fighting way in 1944. Like that was how long it took to open up a second front and actually help out the Russians and start alleviating some of that burden. Like I said, they took on almost 90% of the German Wehrmacht was Russia. So immense sacrifices there that have been forgotten. I'm just kind of scanning through now a little bit more. Yeah, I'm just scanning. If there's any questions, if people like write in the form of a question, that always helps. Somebody wrote the Ritz, the Ethiopian Bible. That's a question. It has a question mark, but it's not really a question as far as the grammar of it. So I don't know. Oh, C and Stewart. Yep, that's what my Bible says. So I see. There's a whole dialogue going on that I was missing. I'll just say something. I'm currently looking a little bit at the Book of Enoch, which takes place. It exists solely within the Ethiopian Bible, and there's something shady about that story as well, and the infusion of the Anunnaki or the Nephilim, fallen lords, that itself was taken from the story of the Book of Enoch, and spun into a sacred story to justify the oligarchical bloodlines, whereby over time the convenient story was concocted that the oligarchy and the higher families, the elite families, are almost like a super species above the inferior species of most humans that were descended from monkeys or whatever. Whereas they were actually infused by these higher angel beings with, so, they're like the star begotten, the star-born higher souls that are endowed naturally to lord over like gods, the many. And similar stories, I think, were told to the primitive Egyptian slaves, the Babylonian slaves, peasants, to keep them psychologically in a state of inferiority, to not be too rebellious, to think of your overlords as being gods, so that you would never even dream of resisting your slave master, right? So there's something there that's being spun for 21st century narrative once again. And a lot of this comes from black magicians that were followers of some of the concoctions of people like John Dee. For those who have looked at John Dee, the sometime advisor, sometime enemy of Queen Elizabeth I, who worked with Edward Kelly, his scryer, his perverse scryer, doing dark demonological magic, casting spells, channeling other stuff. And, one of their concoctions, their innovations, was the creation of a synthetic language that was pretty multi-layered. It was also an encoded language called Enochian that they created. And, it was, again, there was a propaganda machinery to sell it as an ancient, transcendental language that was gleaned from the demons that they were conversing with. I don't believe that at all. It seems like that was a very, very created language, kind of similar to what Tolkien did with Elven and, the various language groups that he innovated in Lord of the Rings. Something similar was done, but it was, again, very, very sophisticated. And this is what people like Aleister Crowley, what people like Madame Blavatsky were also saying that they were doing with their surfing on the Akashic records and, bringing back new languages and things like that from the angels and or demon beings that gave them an ability to have an edge over the mortals. So just to say, they've definitely co-opted the Book of Enoch. Laura Hay seconds some of the ranting remarks that I've thrown out there. Our government, CN Stewart says, our government and upper brass military played and profited at the expense of innocent lives. Correct. Mustard Tiger says, my brother is the same to this day. We are in our 50s now. Well, whatever is mainstream media, current thing, I hear it from him. Yeah, well, that is the world we're in. I think overall mainstream media is taking a big hit. It's taking a big hit. Whatever people think of Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan, there's definitely problems that I have with them. But overall, I think it does demonstrate a principle that they've been getting like 20 times more views than mainstream CNN. So that's good. That's good on one hand. At the same measure, people are like, why is he only halfway happy? I'm only halfway happy because when you realize that a big part of the top-down agenda is to create a new world religion founded upon psychedelic holy drugs that are being normalized to tap into our higher selves, to surf so that everybody could surf the Akashic records, to fuse ourselves with CRISPR or other tech to stay relevant, or basically worship or intercommunicate even with alien gods. And there's definitely a lot of motion in play, and there's been in play to prepare the groundwork for overthrowing conventional Christianity, Islam, pretty much all the religions, with big revelations that are supposed to retell the story of major religions around the idea that aliens are our gods. And that's why what we'll start doing starting next week is playing, I'll use that as a little segue, to announce that what I'll start playing on our Monday night movie nights will be the Hidden Hand Behind UFO series. We're planning to do about 8 episodes. We've already filmed and filmed 4 episodes. Each one is about 35 to 60 minutes in length, of the hidden hand behind UFOs, getting at who's really behind this. Where does this come from? What is Roswell? What is Carl Jung and Alan Dulles, who also had a lot to do with the Nazis, also have to do with the creation of a new ET-based religion? What about Steven Spielberg and Hollywood? What do these operatives have to do with creating a new world religion? It's a lot, but we're going to start doing that next week. I'll bring on Cynthia Chung, my the main writer for episode 1, who will also be here to field some questions. Cian Stewart says, I got kicked off live stream and brought to other Matt posting. Okay, sorry to hear that. Spacey says, I can't stand Theosophy. They were also doing a hybrid version of Hexerai and Boucherie. I don't know what those things are, but I did understand I can't stand Theosophy, and I feel I support that statement a lot. Some Hariananda says, some say the bloodlines of Cain associated themselves with the self-proclaimed superior bloodlines of kings. I wonder if there's any veracity to that. I don't know. What I do know is it's useful to read some of the Gnostic like Nag Hammadi Bible like scriptures, because I think that these things have been around. They've been known by the inner elect, since they were written in the 2nd, 3rd century. They weren't really discovered in 1947 or 45 as the story has been spun, that some dude just ran into a cave. Some kid was throwing rocks into a cave and heard something crash and found like these massive bounties of tens of thousands of documents that turned out to be, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Thomas and Thunder Perfect Mind and all of these things. No, I don't. The Gospel of Philip, what trash. Just read these things and just appreciate what immoral trash that is directly written to make. It's like reading Blavatsky. It's like reading the arrogant writings of a false mystic who pretends that they have no sense of humor. They speak as though they have this arrogant higher knowledge that isn't really knowledge, because it's beyond using reason. So it's something which is purely a very, very, it's something designed to seduce weak-minded people to thinking that they have to go through initiatory practices, which they won't even realize that they're losing their humanity while they're doing that. And then all of a sudden that they'll be promised secret knowledge knowable only to the inner elites by communing with superhuman dark forces or light forces or whatever. That's why Blavatsky called her magazine Lucifer Magazine, right? And they, are recasting the idea that the Jesus you thought you knew is actually the Lucifer Jesus. So that the Jesus that you thought you were reading about in the Bible is actually the avatar of Set. It's the Setian Gospels. That's why they call it that. There's a lot of films also on Netflix, on Amazon Prime. When you know that story, that's the inner belief structure of people of Gnostics, like the Templars, the Hospitallers, and others. When you know that story, look and you'll find it everywhere in comic books, in popular fiction, in films. You'll see it everywhere. They're normalizing it in The Matrix. That's a Gnostic fantasy right there. That the actual creator God of the Bible is an evil demiurge and an emanation from the apathetic higher God that's beyond good and evil, and that this ignorant evil emanation, this Yaljabalth, or whatever the hell it is, created the evil world in his evil image, and thus everything created in creation is actually evil. and scary and horror, even though it might appear to be nice and beautiful and good on the surface, it's actually evil. And that's the religion, is to basically find different techniques of liberating the self from the hypocritical shackles of morality, of conscience, so that you can get back to the purity of God that is you, that is beyond good and evil. That is Nietzsche. So all that to say, it's everywhere. Larry Ellison also, yeah. Philip, what's his name? Philip K. Dick, also Gnostic initiate. Most of the pace setters, those who are granted the authorization to have their imaginations become the pace setters of the zeitgeist of the spirit of the times, are typically, not always, but typically Rosicrucian initiates into varying degrees. You'll see it also with Gene Roddenberry going to the 9, getting seances, getting feedback from channelers of the so-called beings in the rings of Saturn, and using that as his inspiration for a lot of the scenarios that you'll find infused into Star Trek, into especially Deep Space Nine. That'll actually come up in one of our future hidden hand behind UFO films. King James was a man-loving woman hater. A man-loving woman hater. Zero trust in his editing. Yeah, there's definitely King James Stewart was a shady character. Actually, Cynthia is doing a series. For those who don't know, Cynthia Chung's Substack is impeccable, and I'm not just saying that because she's my wife. She does incredible original research. Currently, she's doing a series on the origins of the Rosicrucianism, Rosicrucian fervor, and that plays into the House of Stuart, the Jesuits as well, and the creation of a bunch of religious wars that were actually Rosicrucian rituals, and that are also tied into the Order of the Templars, and something known as bridal mysticism, which she goes through in depth. So if people go to cynthiachung.substack.com, they could follow her series. It's for paid subscribers, but it's only like $5 a month. It's definitely worth that quality of research. Anyone else think Matt may be a hybrid? Okay, Stuart, sure. Bay Theater Dave says, have you checked out the new series Pluribus? No. Pluribus? No. The kingdom of heaven is already inside you. Just have to remember that. That's a good philosophy. What we've all heard about Roswell must be true because we are still talking about it 100 years later. No. Well, you'll see in 4 weeks, we'll do episode 4, Roswell, the creation of a modern myth. No, everything you've been told about Roswell, it's a giant multi-generational magic trick. So yeah, sorry. So I've got, it's 7:25, and in 5 minutes, Ghost is going to launch into his show, which means I should probably start my closing remarks here today. These films that you're watching, I'm hoping people will share them. What you can do is once this is finished, I'm going to insert a link in the comment section so that people can watch the 2 films you watched today and share them. If you want to watch them again, take notes, share them with your network. Part of the reason why we do these things is to give people ammunition to wake up their fellow citizens, loved ones, family members, and just inform yourself on how to navigate the minefield of misinformation on the one hand. And also, part of in my mind, we have to always raise money. This is entirely funded by people like yourselves. And so otherwise, if we can't raise funds, we can't make movies. And making movies is an act of love, but also it does take time, resources, and Jason's got to eat his noodles and survive. And so that's for those who are just coming in late. That's our filmmaker, Jason Dahl. And also our other filmmaker, David Gosselin, who many of you will meet, who helped us make our new Edgar Allan Poe final mystery movie, which we just released 2 weeks ago, and that's currently available on our Substacks for paid subscribers. That's a 90-minute film, Edgar Allan Poe's final mystery, A Tale of Two Murders, which actually takes you into a lot of what we just discussed today as far as the occult Sybil infiltration of America that Poe is actually fighting against. So we're trying to do justice and honor to the memory and purpose of Poe's life. So that's eventually we'll play that in one of our movie nights. So without further ado, I will slowly here just scan to see if there's anything else House of Stuart or House of Stewart I'll let you figure that one out, Stuart. I think you're probably okay. You're not going to be phoenixed. For those who know, they know what that means. Harrianetta says I recently had a major falling out with a good friend about her belief in theosophy. Yeah, you got to give people space. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining me this evening, and we'll see you all again, whoever is able to join on the live stream with Breaking History, where I'll join Gordon once again to talk about world events with a historical perspective on Wednesday at noon. And then we'll do this here on Monday once more with The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs, episode 1. All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.